Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to our session. Today, we're going to be talking about driving hyperautomation success throughout SAP master data processes. And specifically, we're going to be talking about hyperautomation for those complex data-intensive SAP processes that so many of us find so challenging. I'm Andrew Hayden. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager for our Automate products here at Precisely. And today we have the distinct pleasure of being joined by one of our outstanding sales engineers, and that would be Tracy Sullivan. And this is Tracy's first time joining us for a webinar here at Precisely. Tracy, would you take a moment and give the folks a little bit more about your background and introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Andrew. I'm Tracy Sullivan, a sales engineer here at Precisely. I've been here about 9 months. Prior to that, I worked for SAP for several years as an enterprise architect and sales engineer supporting their data and data management tools.
All right, excellent. And Tracy will be back in a few minutes with a demonstration of our Evolve platform. One quick housekeeping item before we get started. If you have questions during the presentation, please add them into the Q&A box that you'll find in the platform, and somebody from Precisely will try and get back to you during the presentation. Now, if we are not able to respond during the presentation, just be assured that somebody from Precisely will get back to you with an answer. So your question will not go unanswered. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, we're going to talk a little bit about why automation and why automation is so hot. It seems like, as part of our digital transformation efforts, automation has become that lead thing that we're doing now. And we're going to talk about why is it so important and what is really driving that interest in automation. And then we're going to talk about hyperautomation, because now the buzzword seems to be hyperautomation. It's the thing we're all doing. But what is hyperautomation and why is it so important? We're going to go through the definition of hyperautomation. And we're going to talk about some of the success we're seeing from customers adopting the principles of hyperautomation in their business. So you get a better sense for what we mean when we talk about hyperautomation and why it's important across your entire enterprise. Now, once we're through that, then we're going to talk specifically about the Precisely Automate platform and why we believe that it is really the core platform for your hyperautomation strategy and what we can do for you. What is it? What does it include? And again, why is it important? And then following that, Tracy's going to walk you through a demonstration of kind of what does it look like? How does our platform, and specifically our Evolve platform, really help you drive efficiencies through your various business processes? And in this case, it's going to be a business partner within SAP S/4HANA. Once she's finished with that, we're going to do a few key takeaways, and then we're going to do a brief wrap up. So let's get started, and let's talk a little bit more about automation. So why is automation so important, and what is really driving it? Well, I think one of the key things about what's driving a lot of the interest in automation right now is coming out of the pandemic. We're looking at our digital transformation efforts up to now, and we're going, okay, we've spent a long time digitizing our processes and digitalizing all of our data. And when the pandemic hit, suddenly we became aware that that helped in certain areas, but it didn't really help us when it came to business processes and driving efficiencies and being able to be more agile and really address a lot of the business challenges that this kind of disruption caused. And coming out of that, we really see there's two areas. There's needs and there's wants that our companies have. So from a needs standpoint, there's really three things we see companies needing coming out of the pandemic. One is to be more agile. We realized that when the pandemic hit in March of 2020, it suddenly changed everything. It was this massive externality that was incredibly disruptive to our businesses. And what we needed to be able to do was pivot and change and move and really do that overnight. So the ability to be agile was never been more important, but it also showed the limitations of where we'd gotten with our digital transformation efforts up to now. So coming out of the pandemic, people are saying more and more, and we hear it more and more from customers, they need to be more agile. At the same time, they need to go faster. I mean, our businesses and the economy and everything else is constantly accelerating. We're collecting more data. We're seeing processes happen faster. We're seeing more agile competitors come in that they can go faster than we can. So we need to be able to go faster. And while you do those two things, you really want to be able to improve the quality and integrity of your most important data. And in the case of what we're going to talk about today, that's your SAP master data. So those are the things we see companies needing. And at the same time, we also see them wanting to do a few things. One, they want to be able to optimize their staffs. I mean, we spent God knows how long, the past few decades, really right-sizing and downsizing and getting our staffs to be just the right size. Now, as the market continues to grow and as things get more dynamic and they need to go faster, we really want to optimize that staff in terms of we want to be able to find technologies that are going to give them time back and allow them to do more and add productivity into their capabilities. We want to be able to reach ROI faster. One of the great criticisms, early criticisms, I should say, of automation was that a lot of people didn't know how to measure ROI. They didn't know how much it was actually costing them, and they didn't know how long it was taking to actually get a payback on it. And we're going to walk through some examples of what our customers have seen from a success standpoint. But we believe now is the time where you can understand the cost of automation and really what the benefits are, and being able to understand the value that you're giving back to your organization, whether it's specifically in terms of monetary benefit or other benefits that do have a monetary component to it. Finding the way to reach ROI faster is becoming more and more important. And then ultimately, it comes down to being able to realize that digital transformation dream. We all want to get there, and we want to get to that point where we have automated as many processes as we can in that hyperautomation model. And we've digitized and we've digitalized all of our data and have that as clean and as simple and as high quality as possible. And we're going to talk about all of those things today. So how do we achieve both those needs and wants? When we look at the broader market and some of the things that are happening with digital transformation, ultimately it all comes down to data. Because data has become the fuel that's driving our decision-making today. And digging into kind of how are we creating and managing that data, in the automation context, Gartner estimates that by 2026, we will have invested over $1 trillion in hyperautomation. Hyperautomation is a huge market and it's growing very quickly. And the fastest growing part of it is process automation, which they estimate is growing at about 12% a year. So large market, growing very quickly. And when KPMG talked to CEOs during the pandemic, they found that about 80% of them are accelerating their digital transformation efforts. This goes back to what I said earlier. They realized that digital transformation in many cases had only gotten us so far. We've digitalized and digitized a lot of our data, but now it's time to really transform our processes. And that's where we see a lot of that investment coming in, and that's where hyperautomation plays into it. At the same time, in that same KPMG study, they found that CEOs are looking to, or 2/3 of CEOs are looking to invest more money in technology than people. But it doesn't mean that they're looking to replace people with technology. What they're looking for goes back to that optimized staff. They're looking for technologies that are going to make their current people more efficient and more effective. They're looking for ways to add productivity into their organizations without either adding or even cutting headcount. And when it comes to SAP organizations, ASUG released some research back in 2021, at the end of 2021, and they found that less than half of SAP businesses or SAP run businesses are actually leveraging automation in a meaningful way. So we have a massive opportunity here to bring automation into these complex data intensive processes that we're going to talk about and really get that business benefit from our hyperautomation strategies. And I think HFS said it very well. And HFS is an analyst firm out of the UK that really focuses on automation. And they said it very well when they said technology is a means to an end, but data is the currency of digital transformation. It really all comes down to data. And when you think about master data and what we're talking about, it's about the processes that create and manage that data, and it's about the processes that use that data. And so what we have to look at really is that interdependence of process and data. And especially in the automation context, you can't separate these two. You can't do a process improvement initiative without looking at the data that process creates and manages. Because if you just automate a process and it just so happens that process creates bad data, what you do by automating the process without considering the data is you can create a lot of bad data really, really quickly. And what you've done is you've increased your business risk and you haven't helped anything, despite the fact you've achieved an automation goal because you've increased the speed of the process. In the same way, you can't really do a data quality initiative without looking at the processes that you are using to create and manage that data. Because if all you're doing is cleaning up data and you're not looking at the processes that are creating bad data, you just run into this vicious cycle where you're going to keep doing the same thing over and over again. You really have to look at the interdependence of these two aspects. And this is one of those areas where hyperautomation comes in. Hyperautomation has become this, I described it earlier, it's kind of a buzz phrase right now, but it's a really important concept when we consider our businesses and digital transformation and how we can adopt automation across our entire enterprise. Now, it's a phrase that was coined by Gartner, and Gartner defines hyperautomation as so. Hyperautomation is a business-driven, disciplined approach that organizations use to rapidly identify, vet, and automate as many business and IT processes as possible. It involves the orchestrated use of multiple technologies, tools, or platforms. So essentially, hyperautomation is automate as much as you can, as quickly as you can, but find the right tools to do it. Now, one of the things that they've said, and they've said it for a long time, they said it in context of RPA, but it applies here too, which is do not try and make one tool answer all of your organization's automation needs. It's better to adopt a best of breed portfolio approach and find what is the best tool for the best situation for an individual use case. And a good example of this was one of our customers a few years ago. And this is a major global beverage company. And they were speaking at a conference in the UK. And their robotics program director said, we have Blue Prism and Precisely Automate, and we choose the best tool on a case-by-case basis. That really, in many ways, encapsulates the definition of hyperautomation. Have a portfolio of tools and find what is the right one for the right time and the right place for each individual use case. In summary, hyperautomation is about automating as many processes across your organization as quickly as possible, choosing from a portfolio of tools and techniques. It's not about choosing one solution. It's not just about saying we're an SAP first and SAP only shop, or we're just going to use UiPath, or we're just going to use Blue Prism. It's about figuring out what is that portfolio that you have of tools and what is going to be the best one or set of tools that are going to apply to a use case and be most effective for you. Hopefully, after you've seen this presentation, you'll get the sense that we believe very firmly that the Precisely Automate portfolio and our platform can be the core of that hyperautomation strategy for you. So what does hyperautomation success look like? What does it mean from a measurement and just automation success standpoint for those SAP processes? And these are examples from many of our customers around the world who've seen really a great deal of success for those core master data processes. So material, customer, vendor, finance, and then a number of others that we've seen. On the material side of this thing, and I'm not going to go through all of these, but we have an energy drinks company that cut their time to market in half. So they cut their cycle times by between 50 and 75%. They gave them a greater competitive advantage, but it also gave them a whole lot of other benefits to it in terms of visibility, data quality, repeatability, many different things they got from it. Another customer reduced the cost to process materials and make a simple materials change by over 90%. So they were able to do this faster. They were able to do this with the existing staff they had, because when they did their analysis initially, it was going to cost them significant amount of money, and it also was going to require them to hire outside staff, temporary folks to help make these changes. With automation, they cut their time. They can do it with the existing people they have. So on the materials side of thing, being able to automate those difficult materials, SAP materials processes, could drive great deal of value and benefit through your entire organization. Customer and vendor is another area where we talk to people a lot, and you know, the idea of reducing the time that it takes to create a customer by 97%. This is an oil and gas company that cut it from 144 hours to 6. A huge amount of savings there. 87% reduction in the time needed to qualify vendors and materials. This is a specialty materials company that prior to finding automation and prior to finding our platform, it took them about 2 years to qualify new vendors and new materials. Again, they're specialty materials. They're now able to do that in about 3 months. So think about what automation is doing in terms of driving benefits into their business. Some other use cases we've seen. One customer estimates that it took less than 9 months to achieve ROI on their automation investment. So their cost of automation was returned to them and more in less than a budget cycle. Huge amount of benefit and value there. And we see this from many customers across really the globe and around the globe and across many different use cases. 1.4 million pricing records changed with no additional headcount. So this is a company that does, they're a furniture distributor. So they sell a lot of things through Amazon and Wayfair and a couple of other online outlets. And these online outlets often will run flash sales. And when they run a flash sale, it's not just that you and I find out about it at the last minute. The distributor finds out about it at the last minute. And so they have to make changes to literally thousands of products in terms of their pricing, in terms of their terms, and a number of other things. And they have to do this in a very, very, very short period of time. And these guys, prior to automation, it literally became an all hands on deck kind of opportunity or incident, I should say, because they didn't have any other way to do it. So anybody who knew anything about SAP in the organization came in and had to make those changes. Now with automation, they're able to make them in a couple of hours using their 3-person pricing staff, and they just go on about their day. So again, efficiency and effectiveness within their organization using the people they currently have. 20,000 journal entries in a very tight 4-day closing window was one of the requirements that one of our customers had. And so they're already working in Excel, and they needed to be able to manage those Excel files that their journal entries were in through a complex workflow and a contingent workflow. So depending on the value of that journal entry, it could either post automatically to SAP or it could go to multiple levels of approval. It could be based on company code. It could be based on region. It could be based on currency, any number of things. They needed that all to be automated so they could manage that much faster. So we were able to deliver that for them. So that's the kind of thing that automation allows you to do within your organization. There are significant benefits you can achieve across your organization and across your SAP ecosystem. All of these use cases that we showed you, you can adopt the platform for one of them and apply it to all of them. That's the benefit of hyperautomation and adopting a hyperautomation strategy, but having a platform that sits at the core of that can work across your entire SAP ERP system. And then across all of these use cases, there are benefits that we see literally anywhere in an organization: eliminating manual data entry, improving data quality through the data stewardship that is integrated into the platform. You can validate data, you can check data, you can enhance data, you can enrich data. All of those things you can do within a form or within an Excel file. The citizen development aspect of hyperautomation, where you're putting the automation development actually closer to the processes and closer to the people who own the process and own the data. So working within the business gives you a significant amount of efficiency for how that is going to get deployed. And then I mentioned stewardship throughout. So you've got both the data stewardship that we talked about, as well as governance that can happen for that process governance and visibility and all kinds of various things that really drive value across and throughout your organization. So that gives you a sense really of why automation is so hot, a little bit more about hyperautomation and some examples of what hyperautomation being deployed can look like. And again, these are a lot of different organizations, but this could be one organization solving all of these problems with the same platform. So that gives you a sense of why the Precisely Automate platform. What makes us such a powerful tool for being able to drive automation efficiencies across your organization? And what does it consist of? Well, it consists of our 2 primary products. It consists of Automate Evolve, which is our workflow engine that helps you drive that complex process organization when you need to go through a complex workflow for review and approval or something of that nature. And we'll talk about some of those examples. And then there's Automate Studio. And Automate Studio really is that Excel to SAP tool that our customers use for mass data processes. So the furniture distributor that I talked about was a really good example of that. They're doing all of that in Automate Studio, where they don't really have to go through a review and approval process. And what does that combination give you? What does that give you? Well, it gives you a complete automation platform. It gives you that data automation for those mass data processes. You're going to manage those in Excel, and there's a very good chance many of you are already doing that. We know that there was some research that came out from 451 that they found that well over 60% of organizations are creating and managing their data, or their data originates in Excel files. So being able to have continue to use those Excel files, but in a governed and managed way, can be absolutely critical. and being able to use them as your primary interface for SAP in many departments can also drive greater benefits. It's less training, it's a lower barrier to entry, things of that nature. Add that to process automation, which in our world comes in two flavors. We've got Excel workflow and we've got Foreman workflow, and you do have that complete automation platform. So Excel workflow can then take those data automation files and manage them through a complex workflow. Journal entries are a really good example, and I mentioned that one earlier, but the 20,000 journal entries in a 4-day closing window. It allows them to have a contingent way of reviewing and approving those various journal entries depending on what all the conditions are that they want in it. So you can see there's a lot of power in that Excel workflow. And at the end of the process, once that final approval is received, it automatically posts to SAP. And you can even post that Excel file into that SAP record. So you have that full record and it's fully auditable. Foreman workflow, on the other hand, is a really, really effective way for automating those complex data-intensive SAP processes that often involve multiple constituents across your organization. So, for example, a vendor create, let's say. If you've got if you think about a vendor create, it often will start in procurement, but it'll need to get approved by somebody in finance. You'll have a master data team. Your materials team is often involved. Frequently, you'll have your logistics and warehousing team. All of those various people are engaged in that vendor create process, and including the vendor themselves. And we'll talk about some of the capabilities we have around that too. But each one of those people in the various parts of the organization can just get a form that only asks them for the information that they need to provide or shows them the information they need to review and approve. So those role-based forms can be very important. And at the end of the process, if you've got a final approver, you can recompile all of that. They can review it and post it automatically into SAP upon approval. Now, throughout that, they're able to validate the data. They're able to enhance it. All of those various things we talked about from a stewardship standpoint. It's fully governed, and it gives you that audit trail you need. So that's what we say when we think about a complete automation platform. It gives you a tremendous amount of capability that you can apply across your entire SAP landscape. And from a hyperautomation standpoint, if you think about the capabilities you want to be able to do that, they really fall not only into these categories, these 10, but into other categories as well. So you have workflow, which really is that process automation orchestration engine that you need to automate those complex data-intensive processes. Connectivity through APIs, where many of these complex SAP processes not only involve SAP, but they involve other systems of record outside of SAP, and being able to connect to those where you've got data that needs to move in and out or be addressed. Self-service. A great example of self-service that we offer is through portals. And again, I'll go back to that vendor create scenario where what a portal can enable you to do is procurement can kick off the process and sends a notification to the new potential vendor. The vendor fills out all that information on a secure internet form that then really kicks off the process within it. So you've eliminated a data entry step internally, and we often find people will do this through, emails that somebody internally then has to go through and transcribe, or handwritten forms, all that kind of stuff. It eliminates that and kicks off that vendor create process. Can drive a lot of efficiencies through them. Also, if you've got vendors who need to change prices, or if you've got customers who need to change a shipping address or something of that nature, a lot of benefits just to simplifying processes and simplifying things for your organization. Data management, we talked about. It's that ability to manage and automate those processes where data is originating or being managed in Excel. Being able to deploy through the cloud. I mean, so many things are being able to deploy through the cloud. And as we go more to a cloud-first stance in many of our IT organizations, we can offer that as well. So we're helping simplify your IT infrastructure and organization. Governance. Yeah, that idea of being able to govern that entire process, make sure that the business rules you have in place are being followed, is absolutely critical to your automation success. Low-code development. Again, we believe very firmly that the closer you can get the development of your automation to the people who know the data and own the process, the more efficient and more effective it's going to be, and the faster it's going to happen. We've done this for 20 years. We've worked very closely with those teams that are close to the business. Often it's people within the business. So you can have SAP super users, or you can have members of your functional SAP team really doing that script development for those automations. attended and unattended automation. And I think a lot of people think of automation as just being that unattended thing. Something happens here, a bunch of software steps happen, and then data gets posted. But most of these complex data intensive processes we're talking about really are attended automation. You need to have humans in that loop. And that's one of the things we specialize in, is being able to automate those human in the loop processes that can be so difficult for many automation tools. We talked about using forms, and then the ability to really maintain and improve your initial data quality and the integrity of your data throughout that automation process. So from a hyperautomation stance, this is where we believe very firmly that the Automate platform, the Precisely Automate platform, can be the core of your hyperautomation strategy for your SAP processes. So some of the things you're going to see when Tracy walks through her demo are how you can reduce cycle times and improve compliance through workflow. And what does that workflow look like, and what can it do for you and for your customers? Improve data quality. So we have that data stewardship built in for both whether you're using an Excel front end or whether you're using a web form. Deep SAP integration capabilities. We have patented SAP integration capabilities that really, we understand how those SAP processes work, how SAP works. We've done this, like I said, for a very long time. And then the ability to help you make an impact at scale. You know, one of the key things, if you think about automation, hyperautomation, it is that idea of being able to automate as much as you can, as quickly as you can across your organization, making an impact at scale. But you want to be able to centrally manage that platform. You want to administer all the things that are happening there, make sure that your people using it, that you're not ending up with automation happening in sort of a shadow IT kind of context. And that's one thing we work very hard with our customers to make sure is not happening. Dashboarding and getting visibility into your processes. We've got multiple customers who've adopted us for nothing more than just being able to have visibility into their processes. Because if you think about a lot of these complex data intensive SAP processes, it's not a process. It's a process made up of multiple sub-processes. So having visibility throughout that entire value chain is incredibly important. Having the historical record to be able to drive further improvements in your efficiency, very critical. And ultimately, it comes down to being more agile and being able to adjust to changes in the marketplace more quickly. And being able to do this across your entire SAP landscape, as I've mentioned multiple times. You know, it's not a process, it's your entire SAP landscape. It's materials, it's customer, it's vendor, it's finance and accounting and those core GL account processes. And then plant maintenance is one where we often find a lot of interest because you have so many different moving parts. You've got assets, you've got consumables, you've got actual processes happening, you many different things, that being able to manage that more efficiently and automate those processes using, oftentimes forms, can really drive a lot of benefits into that part of the organization. So hopefully through this, you've got a better sense of what automation is, what is hyperautomation, and then how does the Precisely Automate platform really apply to your hyperautomation strategy. And now I'm going to turn it over to Tracy, and Tracy is going to walk you through a short demo of how we can drive benefits into your SAP S/4HANA business partner processes. So Tracy?
Today's demo will cover a user-friendly web form that we will show how to enrich data with web services, as well as show some validations and some business rules that have been incorporated in the form, and then how that form is passed through a flexible workflow. Let me jump over to the form. This is our business request form. And as you can see, there are very few fields to start. I have a field that has been added to the form for a request number. And then I have a list of values for customer or supplier, depending on which type of business partner I want to create. I'm going to create a customer. And this brings up a set of fields for the general data part of the business partner in SAP. I have a field here that is the name it's required, which is indicated by these red dots. I'm going to enter a customer name and a search term. And as you see, these two fields, as I exit out, are capitalized. That is part of our business rules. that have been decided for me, and I'm going to enter a language, which is also required. The next is entering my address, and this uses a type ahead technology that is a Google service. So as I type each, I'm given a list of options, and as I continue to type, the data is refined, so I can then find the address that I actually want and select it. At the same time, when the address field is updated, the map is updated using a Google service as well via our web services. I then want to check the address. Even though the type ahead found this address, I want to make sure that it is accurate. So again, I'm going to use our Spectrum on Demand address validation, where a call will be made to Spectrum on Demand to bring back the correct data for the address. And it's going to validate that address, and you'll notice that it changed road to RD, which is the Postal Service standard, as well as it's added the zip +4. I can also do a premium address validation, which will bring in lots of other fields, as well as break the address down into its component parts if those are needed by the user. And it'll enrich the data with things like latitude and longitude. The next step is to validate the role, and this is going to validate the data that has been entered on the form, ensuring that it is accurate according to the business rules and the validations. And it'll also go to SAP and make sure that all the entries exist in fields that have check values. As you can see here, I've entered something wrong in the language field. So I'll go back up, and obviously I did a typo. So let's look at another type of list of values that is in a database. And this, I can use the F4 SAP list of values, or I can also create my own list of values that is stored within the Evolve database. So I've chosen English, and I am then going to check my address again, and then validate. I have a success, so then I can then save and route this. When I save it, it is going to then kick off that workflow that we talked about. And while it is saving, let's jump over to the workflow and see what process we're going to take. So here's our general role. And the general role not only includes the entry of the request, but then that needs to be either approved. We didn't enter any bank data, so it's going to follow here, and somebody's going to need to post and approve that role is our next step. Once that is complete, then it'll ask what kind of partner type did we create, and that was our list of values in the beginning. We are going to take the customer loop, and within the customer loop, we have a couple of parallel tasks that are being created, the customer company and the customer sales data that needs to be completed. And then once that is done, we'll go into and approve and post the roles for each of the customer sales and the customer company. Once that is complete, we can either cancel if it's been rejected, or complete the request. We will get email notifications at each step of the way, as well as the tasks for the workflow can also be sent via email. I'm going to access the tasks through Evolve. And as you can see here, I have the approve and post the general role. I have some overdue tasks here, and you can put service level agreements on each of the tasks, and then alerts will come, either a day, at whatever interval you would like. So I'm going to enter my task, and this will display the form that was completed. Everything is grayed out because I do not have the ability to change anything. If something is wrong, or I do not want this business partner to be created, I can reject this workflow. But otherwise, I will validate the general role again, make sure that it is still successful. Once that is complete, I can then uncheck that and post the general role. And this will post the business partner to SAP. it'll bring back the business partner number that was created in SAP, and then I can approve my task. The next step is, if you remember the workflow, where it's going to create the customer sales and the customer company tasks at the same time, because it is a parallel transaction. So I'm going to first go into customer sales. And again, I have some information that was on the original form. I can expand and look at the address data if I would like. And I can populate my sales information. I've pre-populated a lot of this data for the demonstration, but if I would like, I can change any of these values. I'm going to validate the customer data. Again, it's doing that same validation where it's making sure all the required fields are entered, as well as that the values are accurate. And obviously I missed a required value field. So I'm going to update this with South and validate again, make sure that I have a success. I do. So I'm going to complete my task. The next task is the customer company data. And again, these can be sent via email so that there is a link to this form and they can access that if they're not in Evolve all the time. I can then expand everything. I have pre-populated my data, make sure all my required fields are entered, and I'll validate the customer data and ensure it's successful. You can add your own fields here if you want to use a couple different fields to determine the value for another field, for example, or you can use rules to restrict the entry for specific fields. So I have success. So I am going to complete that. That will then complete that parallel execution. It will then go, and the next step is to post and approve the customer roles that were completed by the master data team. So I'm going to go into that task. This time I see all of the data that I entered. I can expand the address and look at it. And I see the customer company data, where I can validate again, but I see a success here. I can also scroll down and I can see the list of tasks and who completed them and when. So if I had a question, I could go back to that person as well. So I'm going to post the customer data. Again, it's posting and updating that business partner that was created in the beginning. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the post customer sales. As you can see, I've received 2 messages from SAP that the changes have been saved, and I'm going to approve and complete. This will complete our workflow and update the, everything will be updated in SAP. If I need to, I can actually go back in and look at the data and see that form at any time. I can check it and look at its version history. I can see the form again if I need to. All the data is there. You can see the business partner number. So that completes the demo. We saw a user-friendly web form where I streamlined data collection by pre-populating some fields, as well as using lists of values to help the user to find the data that they need. We enriched the data with web services and quickly acquired external data to populate our form. We looked at some validation rules, allowing for a faster posting with the correct data at the time of posting, and then saw the flexible workflow, being able to design something that is either complex or very simple using parallel tasks, singular tasks, as well as collecting that information through the process flow. I'll turn it back to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Tracy. That was outstanding. And once again, welcome to the team. Now that you've seen what we're talking about in terms of understanding hyperautomation, let's just walk through once again quickly some of the benefits that the Precisely Automate platform can give you. We can deliver that agility that you need. Think about the pricing changes where now you can do it in just a couple of hours. They've got thousands of changes very quickly. So they can pivot and move as soon as they get notification that, oh, you've got a flash sale coming up tomorrow. Not a problem for them. You can go a lot faster. The company that was able to cut the time for identifying materials and vendors and approving them from 2 years to 3 months. There's speed in that. Improving data quality and improving that overall data quality, process visibility, knowing what's happening throughout the process. That business team focus, being able to work with business teams and getting your automation development closer to the teams where it matters. That's absolutely important. The automation flexibility, Tracy talked about it, whether you're going to, is it a sequential process? Is it a parallel process? Are you going to use Excel as your front end, or are you going to work in forms? And many other parts of contingency that can happen that add the flexibility to it, as you saw in the workflow demonstration that Tracy had. Scalability. We work in many of the largest corporations in the world, and we work often across multiple parts of their SAP landscape. And some of these processes cross multiple parts of their SAP landscape. So we're able to scale across very large organizations, and we have a proven track record. As I mentioned, we've done this for nearly 20 years. We believe very firmly that we are your best option for creating that core of your hyperautomation strategy, because it has been all about empowering business teams to make an impact across that organization. So a few key takeaways from this presentation. Hopefully you have a much better sense of how the Precisely Automate platform can become kind of that center and core for your hyperautomation strategy, because it's not just about one tool. It's about really finding the right set and portfolio of tools to drive your hyperautomation strategy and your hyperautomation success. As Gartner said, it involves the orchestrated use of multiple technologies, tools, and platforms. Keep that in mind as you're developing your hyperautomation strategy. You need to make sure that you're considering both process and data. It's not just about automating processes. It's understanding the data that is created and managed by that process and how it is all getting created and managed, and making sure you can give it the highest quality possible. We have a long track record of success doing this. So we believe very firmly we can help you, and that our platform is going to be the best alternative you have for the core of your hyperautomation strategy. We focus on those data intensive, complex SAP master data driven processes in materials, vendor, customer, and GL accounts. And there is so much more that we can do literally across your entire SAP landscape. We are happy to help you do that. A couple of quick things as we wrap up here. For those of you who aren't particularly familiar with Precisely, there's a good chance if you're on the SAP side, you are familiar with WindShuttle. In 2021, WindShuttle was acquired by Precisely. So we are now part of the world's leading portfolio of data integrity products. And that's what Precisely is. We are the world's leader in data integrity, which means we give you the accurate, consistent, and contextualized data that you need to make those really confident business decisions that are data-driven in today's really complex business world. We've got about 12,000 customers worldwide in over 100 countries. We're in 99 of the Fortune 100, and we've got around 2,500 employees. Now, many of the world's largest brands trust us with their data and automating their data. And hopefully after you've seen this, you will trust us with your data and automating your complex SAP processes. In addition, we also have partnerships with many of the leading technology providers. So there's a good chance you have some or many of these in your IT stack, and we can work with those as well. So it's not just on the automation side, but on that data integrity side. And finally, I just want to leave you with this thought. And this is a quote from Justin Trudeau, and he said it a few years ago, but it remains true today. And in many ways, it probably has never been more true. And the quote is, "The pace of change has never been this fast, but it will never be this slow again." I think for all of us who work in an area that is data related, we feel this intimately and personally. Things are accelerating and they're going faster and faster and faster. And this frightening thought that it will never be this slow again is just mind blowing, because it's almost exhausting. However, we believe very firmly at Precisely that automation is a great way to manage and get control of this sense of acceleration and be able to handle that constant change that's happening in your world and the pace at which your data is changing and your business is changing. And it may never be this slow again, but there are ways to manage it. And we believe very firmly that automation is probably one of the core ways to be able to do that. So with that, I want to thank everyone. Tracy, thank you very much. I appreciate you're here again. Welcome to your first webinar. Any final thoughts?
No, thank you for the opportunity to do my first webinar, and I hope everybody got what they were looking for, and will reach out to us if you have any questions.
Thank you. And thank all of you. I know your time is valuable, and we very much appreciate that you are here, and I hope you all have a happy and healthy day. Thank you very much. Bye.